Today, I will tell you about the Belt and Road Initiative and financial fraud. After Xi Jinping took office in China, he pushed for so-called financial reform, known as peer-to-peer financial fraud. In China, tens of millions of people have been cheated out of their life savings by the Chinese Communist Party, amounting to trillions of dollars. I was one of the victims. Victims are not allowed to discuss peer-to-peer fraud in China. So I have to escape from China is to expose the peer-to-peer financial fraud by the Chinese Communist Party and Xi Jinping. Peer-to-peer financial fraud is very complicated. To put it simply, the purpose of Xi Jinping's peer-to-peer financial fraud is to invest the fraudulent money in the Belt and Road Initiative, bribery and military expansion. Let's tell you the story from the beginning. Li Keqiang proposed financial reform. CCP robbed the people's money. After Li Keqiang and Xi Jinping came to power in 2012, Li Keqiang proposed financial reform. According to the propaganda at that time, Li Keqiang hoped to break the monopoly of state-owned banks on finance and let private capital serve private companies in China, so he supported the peer-to-peer industry and allowed private capital to lend money. From the original intention of Li Keqiang, it seems that there is no problem. If we can operate in good faith and with no scam, there is no problem. But China's red powerful families don't think so. They believe that it was a very good opportunity to rob the people's money. According to my observation, China's red powerful family can be divided into three groups in peer-to-peer affairs: Jiang Zemin faction, Xi Jinping faction, and Li Keqiang faction. Jiang Zemin faction play Ponzi scheme. The Jiang Zemin faction is characterized by Ponzi schemes, fabricated false investment projects. When a certain amount of money is defrauded, they announce that the boss has escaped and all the money is disappeared. Put a few unknowing company executives in jail and everything is over. Because Jiang Zemin's group controlled China's judicial system in previous years, this was a conspiracy they had planned long ago. Such cases account for about 60%. Xi Jinping faction invested in Belt and Road lost money. The characteristic of the Xi Jinping faction is that the State-Owned Asset Supervision and Administration Commission raised funds and invested all the funds in the Belt and Road Initiative. It is used to bribe foreign officials. Because the Belt and Road Initiative projects are all projects with a long term, there is no return at all in the short term. Peer-to-peer projects are short-term loans with high interest rates. Just like the Ponzi scheme, the capital chain is bound to break. When the game could not be played, Xi Jinping declared that these peer-to-peer companies were illegally raising funds, and then all the customers' money disappeared. And Xi Jinping is not allowed to investigate the whereabouts of funds. I invested some money in such a peer-to-peer company, and we hired a lawyer to conduct an investigation, and I personally participated in 2 court hearings. So I have a lot of evidence. Such peer-to-peer companies account for about 30%. Xi Jinping controls the Chinese military and now seems to have more power, so the Belt and Road funds that Xi Jinping does not allow anyone to expose actually come from peer-to-peer fraud. Li Keqiang faction invested in private companies and bring down by Xi Jinping. According to the original plan, the peer-to-peer companies of the Li Keqiang faction and the private capital raised to private companies. Most of these companies are running smoothly. But in 2018, Xi Jinping's investment in the Belt and Road all lost money. In order to cover up this fact, Xi Jinping wants to bring down all the peer-to-peer companies that are running smoothly. He issued a very absurd order. He does not allow any peer-to-peer companies to ask for debts from borrowing companies. And Xi Jinping has arrested investors who demanded debt from borrowing companies. It also ordered the court not to support peer-to-peer companies asking for debts from borrowing companies. Under Xi Jinping's impetus, no enterprise will pay its debts. causing all peer-to-peer companies to bankrupt. Peer-to-peer companies of the Li Keqiang faction account for about 10%. And I invested $120,000 in the company of the Li Keqiang faction. So I am very clear about the operation of these companies and Xi Jinping's persecution of us. We have very solid evidence that our money was robbed by Xi Jinping to cover up his Belt and Road mistakes. So my purpose in leaving China is to expose all the evils of the Chinese Communist Party. The Chinese Communist Party does not belong to mankind at all. They are enemies of the Chinese people and people all over the world. They are monsters who eat people's flesh and drink people's blood.